everybody. Reporting to you again from the Glamour City, Hollywood.
Titanium metal is a superior metal because it's lightweight and strong, but also it's corrosion resistant. It's corrosion resistant because titanium metal forms a skin of titanium oxide, titanium dioxide on its skin. And that titanium oxide layer is impervious to corrosion. What makes it impervious to corrosion is also what makes it very, very difficult to reduce as well. It's tough to extract those oxygen atoms from the titanium. Had a scientific breakthrough around was the hydrogen assistance. So what was not realized before was that titanium can pick up, while it picks up oxygen, it can also pick up hydrogen. So that hydrogen would get into those bonds and essentially destabilize those titanium oxygen bonds. And all of a sudden, what was thermodynamically impossible, which was to just simply reduce those oxygen atoms by using a reductant like magnesium powders, metal powders, which is what we use, with the hydrogen assistance, you could simply reduce it. So instead of going through that whole process to create titanium tetrachloride and then reduce it, distill it, we have a very simple process where we hydrogenate it. We in a hydrogen atmosphere, we just reduce that titanium mineral or the titanium scrap, which has picked up a lot of oxygen, with the magnesium metal powders and produce titanium metal. Now, our process is more than 50% the energy reduction. You got zero scope 1 carbon inputs, so zero. Scope 2, you've got renewable power, so whatever the carbon intensity you apply to that renewable power in the manufacturing of that renewable power, the solar panels or the wind turbines, that's your only carbon emissions that you see in the system. So it completely eliminates carbon, and it's a much more sustainable process.
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for a show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show. Today, I'm joined by Anastasios Arima, CEO of IperionX. Welcome to the show today.
Hi, thanks for having me, Scott.
So, Tazo, you founded Piedmont Lithium, which is now trading on NASDAQ. I wonder if we could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Piedmont Lithium, I moved to the United States in 2015, and I was in the fossil fuel sector before then. And once I moved to the US in 2015, I wanted to transition me and my team away from fossil fuels and to minerals that will support, or supply chains that will support, the decarbonisation thematic, which I could see was going to become very big. This is back in 2015, 2016, before EVs were a very big thing. And so we started focusing on lithium, and I founded Piedmont Lithium with my team with the view to develop a sustainable American source of lithium for what we could see would be a significant amount of demand as electric vehicles and energy storage was going to take off.
So talk to us about the forecasted demand for lithium. What are we expecting? Is it primarily being driven by storage needs for EV and other things? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's a good question. When I was getting into it, I was looking at storage, but then EVs as well, but it's primarily EVs. So today you have almost every large automotive company in the world has committed to building or to going down and having EV models. Some have committed to not having any more internal combustion engines by 2025 and 2030, depending on which company it is, and going all the way to EV. So it's definitely being driven by that. And I think everybody's realized that that is a more sustainable way to go, but you also have to try and tie in your raw material supply chain to produce those EVs as being more sustainable. And hence the thesis that we had that with Piedmont Lithium, that groups, large automotive OEMs would move towards American or Western world production, where regulation is much more stringent, and you can track and account for how you make those raw material inputs has played out, and we're going to probably see that increasingly become a focus of OEMs. And you saw it from the Department of Energy and the White House a few days ago when they announced grants and investment into the sector to reshore it in America.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And really, that's a bigger trend, right? In terms of what we're saying now, specific to lithium. Of course, a lot of it is mined in South America, as well as parts of Europe as well. But the big players are going to be the Chinese, and then followed by, I think, the Koreans as an example. And I wonder, how does that really affect America's independence, as we look to new industries like the EV industry and other sustainable industries?
Yeah, it's a good question again, and it's a lot more complex than what people realize. So today, half of your raw material lithium production comes actually from Western Australia in the form of a spodumene, a hard rock mined concentrate that is then shipped to China and processed into the battery chemicals that then the cathode manufacturers can use. You have another significant portion come from South America, both Argentina and Chile, and that's also, a lot of that is shipped to China. Some of that is shipped to America and produced into lithium carbonate or lithium hydroxide for the batteries. Then you have the further downstream of taking those lithium chemicals and making cathode, and that is really centered around South Korea, Japan, and mainly China right now. So what we're seeing going forward today, and what we saw from the White House just yesterday, and what we've been seeing from OEMs push in both Europe and the US especially, is to reshore all that supply chain here in America. So the DOE funded not just Piedmont Lithium. Piedmont Lithium received over 140 million 2 days ago from the DOE, but they also funded cathode and anode manufacturers. So you could reshore that whole supply chain. What we have got in the US and Europe is a lot of gigafactories being built. The raw materials for those gigafactories tend to be anode, cathode, separator, things like that you need to supply into that. So that we are making steps in the US to reshore that capacity. It will happen. It's just going to take time.
Great. Thank you for that overview. Appreciate that. Now, at the time of this recording, the winner of TechCrunch Disrupt Startup Battlefield was Minerva Lithium. That's created this polymer framework that allows them to extract, I believe, 1 metric ton of lithium using just 30,000 gallons of water in 3 days. Compare that to the standard evaporative approach that needs about 500,000 gallons of water to get the same amount of lithium. So that's pretty significant. And I wonder, without belaboring it a little bit too much, but talk to us about the externalities that typical lithium mining causes and ways that you're seeing maybe mitigate some of those issues.
Yeah, you've got a range of technology which is coming into play. You can, from a hard rock perspective, if you look at not the lithium brines, but the lithium hard rock, which is 50%, and the growing supply of lithium raw material supply, that can be, if you use electric mining fleets as the industry is moving towards, and with proper design of your mine, that can be sustainable. You drill blast, you extract the rock, and then you can, if you use renewable power and use sustainable processing methods, you can be sustainable and use a lot less water as well in the production of those lithium concentrates that then go to be produced. But the brines use a lot of water. They just need to. And there's a lot of these direct lithium extraction technologies that they're looking at, trying to minimize that and make it more better on the environment, which is great. And I think somebody's going to crack the code. I've followed Minerva. I really like what they do. I think the lady there that has a PhD on the technology is fantastic, and I wish her all the success. And I think she's got some really interesting technology. But I think in the short term, you're going to see existing best-in-class technology be applied to some of these processes. And over the longer term, you're going to see innovation continue to make lithium and general raw materials for batteries more sustainable.
Great. Super. Thank you for that. Now, what is IperionX?
So IperionX is really a focus post our developing Piedmont Lithium, focused on reshoring and making a more sustainable supply chain for titanium metal. So once Piedmont was having some success, outstanding team, outstanding CEO, I could see a pathway to me moving away and the team starting to look at some other critical supply chains in the US, which are tied to decarbonisation, tied to the thematic of electric vehicles, lightweighting. And so we looked at titanium metal, and in reshoring titanium metal in the US, because we don't make it anymore in the US from the minerals, but also making that supply chain circular and making that supply chain far more sustainable. So that's what we are focused on.
Super. Now, again, the focus is around, bringing back to American shores in an environmental responsible way. And I wonder if you could go into a little bit more depth around how you guys do that.
Absolutely. So we secured early on as part of our company, we secured technology developed by Dr. Zuck Fong out of the University of Utah, world-renowned metallurgist, a friend of mine now after many years of working with him. And he was funded by the Department of Energy's ARPA-E program to develop breakthrough technology which could not just lower the cost of manufacturing titanium metal, but also make it in a far more sustainable way and make it circular as well. So the history of titanium metal is that it's a relatively young metal in the age of metals. It was only discovered a few hundred years ago and only commercially produced from the 1950s onwards. But it's got some amazing properties: lightweight, strong, corrosion resistant, that can lead it to being a superior metal to use in place of steel, stainless steel, aluminum. But it's been held back because it's costly. But it also has another disadvantage in that it's a highly toxic, a highly carbon intensive process, the current process to make titanium metal. So what we're focusing on is to not just make it cheaper so that we can more widely use the metal across a lot of industries, more automotive components to make electric vehicles lighter weight, make personal electronic devices made out of titanium so they last longer, 100% recyclable, stronger, but to also bring down that carbon intensity, make titanium metal from being one of the most carbon intensive, environmentally unfriendly metals to making it the most environmentally friendly metal to make.
And I think to really appreciate the approach that was developed by Dr. Fang in conjunction with the DOE, really we need to go a little bit deeper in terms of the process, starting with the hydrogen-assisted metal thermic reduction process, followed by the granulation citrine deoxygenation, and then the synthetic rutile process for that whole process to get into the final form. Can you walk us through that and how that is different from what is done currently?
Yeah, absolutely. So to keep it at a high level, I'll walk you through what's done today. And then we'll go into how it's fundamentally different, the way Dr. Fong approached it. So, and his scientific discovery. So today, titanium metal is a superior metal because it's lightweight and strong, but also it's corrosion resistant. It's corrosion resistant because titanium metal forms a skin of titanium dioxide on its skin, and that titanium oxide layer is impervious to corrosion. What makes it impervious to corrosion is also what makes it very, very difficult to reduce as well. It's tough to extract those oxygen atoms from the titanium. So in nature, titanium is an oxide. It's a titanium dioxide essentially, and scrap titanium metal picks up oxygen and becomes a highly oxygenated titanium metal. So historically, to break those oxygen bonds, to reduce titanium oxide into titanium metal, or to re-reduce titanium scrap into titanium metal, you would really have to go through the Kroll process. And the Kroll process was a carbothermic chlorination process. So you bring in the titanium dioxide, you hit it with a lot of carbon, a lot of energy, and a lot of chlorine. So all that sounds terrible, and it is. And you would essentially create titanium tetrachloride, and you would be able to reduce that titanium tetrachloride, which in and of itself is a nasty chemical, with molten magnesium metal. Very high temperature reaction, distill that out. So you'll distill out the magnesium chloride, which comes off that, and you'll end up with this titanium metal sponge, and then you'll have to melt that titanium metal sponge multiple times to get to a purified titanium metal ingot, which you could then take and make into products. A lot of waste along the way to make a titanium metal product. So, you would lose typically more than 90% of the original titanium metal to make a titanium metal part in that supply chain. But the carbon intensity and the energy intensity is super high. And it all comes down to it's so hard to break those titanium oxygen bonds. So what Dr. Fong saw and had a scientific breakthrough around was the hydrogen assistance. So what was not realized before was that titanium can pick up, while it picks up oxygen, it can also pick up hydrogen. So that hydrogen would get into those bonds and essentially destabilize those titanium oxygen bonds. And all of a sudden, what was thermodynamically impossible, which was to just simply reduce those oxygen atoms by using a reductant like magnesium powders, metal powders, which is what we use. With the hydrogen assistance, you could simply reduce it. So instead of going through that whole process to create titanium tetrachloride and then reduce it, distill it, we have a very simple process where we hydrogenate it. In a hydrogen atmosphere, we just reduce that titanium mineral or the titanium scrap, which has picked up a lot of oxygen, with the magnesium metal powders and produce titanium metal. Now, our process is more than 50% the energy reduction. In some titanium products, it can be well more than that. And we use electric furnaces, and those electric furnaces in our new facility that we announced in Virginia are going to be fired by 100% renewable power. So there'll be electric coming from renewable power. So your scope 1, scope 2 emissions, you've got zero scope 1 carbon inputs, so zero. Scope 2, you've got renewable power. So whatever the carbon intensity you apply to that renewable power in the manufacturing of that renewable power, the solar panels or the wind turbines, that's your only carbon emissions that you see in the system. So it completely eliminates carbon. Whereas before, carbon was a key part of it. You would add carbon in to create carbon dioxide to extract those oxygen atoms. Whereas today we use no carbon. We can use 100% renewable power, and it's a much more sustainable process. That key technology around deoxygenation is what drives everything else for us. So granulation, sintering, deoxygenation is just, instead of making an angular powder, we want to make a spherical powder. We go through that granulation and sintering where we spray dry little spherical powders, titanium metal powders, and then we use our process to make those spherical powders completely up to ASTM specifications. And so that process, also in being a lot more sustainable and a lot more clean, a lot easier, is also far more cheaper than the current process. We can produce, more than 50% reduction in the cost of titanium spherical metal powders, for instance, for additive manufacturing.
So there's a lot there. First, if you could talk a little bit about within the electric furnace, there's got to be some output, right? So is there any type of carbon output as a result of that furnace? And
no.
then,
Go ahead. Sorry. No, go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead.
So in the furnace, to hit on that, absolutely none. The only output is hydrogen. At small scale, you won't recapture that hydrogen. Hydrogen isn't a GHG gas, GHG emission. But in the future, at scale, you recapture that hydrogen, you recirculate it around. So absolutely none.
Amazing. Now, you hit on a really interesting point, which is not only is this process just better in terms of just a sustainability perspective, but then the cost is significantly less as well. And I wonder how that has an impact in terms of commodity and spot market for something like this.
Absolutely. It's a good question. There's not a very large spot market right now for titanium metal. It's heavily traded between the mills or the producers and the end customers. But it will grow as additive manufacturing as well grows. There's going to be more of a powder for titanium metal powders as well. And I like additive manufacturing because that in and of itself is a sustainable source of manufacturing. You use electric power to fire the lasers, and it's a much better way to go. And I see that being the future in the next 5-10 years. But us being there, we essentially will change the game for a lot of titanium metal parts and products by bringing down the cost. We can make it more widely available. It's not exactly a commodity today, unlike say copper or nickel. But as we produce more, we can have it more widely available. Now this is a proprietary technology which we can only do. But in the future, could it be much more commoditized, bring down that cost substantially over the next 10-15 years? Absolutely. And I think that's going to have a big impact on when people are looking at manufacturing different parts, components for different products, or just manufacturing different products. All of a sudden, they can say, well, that product, why should it be stainless steel now, which has got a significant carbon intensity and also uses a lot of nickel. Nickel in and of itself has got a significant carbon intensity. That nickel should be going into electric vehicles because there's a shortage of nickel for electric vehicles, and you can use titanium metal instead.
Now, I believe one of your first mine is in Tennessee. Can you talk about that and then give us a picture of the kind of size of the deposits that we have in the United States and whether that's going to be enough for us to sustain the need for titanium in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So today we produce from titanium metal scrap. So we will not need to tap the titanium minerals of the US for a while. We have quite a large source of titanium metal scrap in the manufacturing of titanium metal products today in America. So about 50 or 60,000 tons. So our initial focus is to make that scrap supply chain fully circular, because that's that initially, like I've been involved in the minerals industry all my career. I think if you can recycle, you should recycle, and maximum utilization of raw materials is what we should be doing. So our focus probably for the next 5 years is maximum recycling, get as much as we can out of the already mined, processed titanium metal that's in scrap. But then at some point we will run out of scrap. And as we look to deploy our titanium metal, which is more sustainable than other metals, and a better fit for some products, we will eventually need to tap the minerals and luckily in the US we've got a significant amount of titanium minerals here which are untapped. So across West Tennessee, what we've seen is already in the last 2 years of what we've explored for, we see over 25 years of supply of titanium metal, contained titanium metal, which would fulfill 80% of our current titanium metal demands in the United States. And we are just scratching the surface of the potential of the titanium minerals in West Tennessee. And we also see a lot more in Alabama, Mississippi, coming all the way around. So we are lucky in this country that we do have, in the United States, that we do have a significant potential untapped source of titanium minerals. And I think it's going to be, as we develop our business, there's going to be more and more of those minerals that can come out.
So my final question is education, in that I think there's a general public, let's call it myths or misconception around mining in general, and that mining, and certainly the hot topic these days is mining lithium, is going to cause these externalities, environmental and otherwise. So how do you actually go about some of this NIMBY problem, not in my backyard issues, that's going to rise as a result of grassroots movements and other NGOs that are fighting to stop any type of mining whatsoever?
That's a really great question. Look, people, have a right to their own opinions, and it just, like you say, it comes down to education. I think you're always, in every project, in any part of the world, you're always going to have some opposition to developments, new developments, change, essentially. Here in the US, with lithium, and then with what we're doing and with other minerals, there's there is more education needed. The companies that I've seen are trying that and are doing, a fairly good job. But there's a continued education and there's support needed from community officials, government officials, and I think you're seeing that in the administration today and the government today realize that we should do it here, because if we don't do it here and we do it in places that don't have the environmental regulations that we have, we're just shipping those emissions and those environmental consequences to other parts of the world, which does not help anybody. So there's education to do here. Or if you plan an operation right, you can minimize and mitigate a lot of the potential negative consequences. In doing anything, in making a Coke can, you would have some sort of impact on the environment. It's all about how you mitigate it, how you control it, and there's technology out there where you can mitigate it, control it, and make it a sustainable and traceable and accountable source. So that's it's just educating, getting in there, educating the communities. We at IperionX have done a lot of that and try to continue to do a lot of that. We've got a lot more to do around our process. Our potential mineral extraction process is a lot more benign than other mining processes. Ours is more akin to farming, because we return the land back pretty much immediately after we extract the minerals. You don't leave a big open pit there. You don't use any acids. You just use water and gravity. But even if you are using drill blasting, leaching, there is still mitigation measures. There is still technology that can absolutely minimize those environmental impacts, and it just needs to be educated and taught to the communities and the officials out there.
So years after you've exhausted the titanium scraps and you start to do some kind of virgin mining, talk about your strategy around having your own facility in some of these places within the US, or are you looking to license some of those technologies? And is it primarily just focused on the US, or would you also consider outside of the US, and how would that licensing or JVs work?
That's a good question. That's going 10 years onwards. I do see from the processing of minerals and scrap metal us doing some things in other Western nations, in Europe, for instance, in Southeast Asia, in Japan. But that's well into the future from scrap. From mineral, because we are blessed here in the US, like I said, with what we think is a lot of titanium mineral. And the titanium mineral, it's essentially a sand, Scott. It's not it's not a hard rock. So we just use gravity essentially to separate out the sand from the titanium minerals, and then we can easily process it using physical separation processes. So those sort of facilities will remain, I think, in the US, owned by us. And then we can separate out these titanium minerals, and then those we can put through our process. So I could imagine a supply chain where, we are using as much scrap. So we're always having circularity on the scrap side once we've produced metal. But then when we're extracting from the mineral sands starting in Tennessee, where we're separating into the titanium minerals sustainably using water, gravity, advanced rehabilitation methods, where we're working with the University of Tennessee's Institute of Agriculture today to look at some advanced rehabilitation methods. And then we are shipping off these titanium minerals. We're producing some in West Tennessee. Maybe we're shipping some off to our facilities across the country and in other parts of the world. I don't see we could potentially joint venture partner with maybe downstream partners, whether it be existing OEMs who want their own source of our titanium metal, or whether it be partners in other countries, like the existing titanium producers in Japan, for instance, who could see this as a better way for sustainability. But that's well down the track. I see us really controlling and making sure that our supply chain is accountable and sustainable all the way through. Because what we want to do, our vision in and the way we operate in IperionX is we want to build this, and we want the vision to be that we've left the world in a better place than what we found it as well.
So going back to one of the key thematic aspects that you have repeatedly reinforced, which is domestic, and as it relates to not relying on the global supply chain, specifically China, for a lot of these raw mining and processing aspects. And when we layer on this geopolitical context and the fact that your prior company was received additional funding from DOE, for instance, is that there is a growing danger, and your original home, Australia, is very much at the front doorstep of China and Taiwan, and then who knows what happens after Taiwan. So, talk to us about why this, bringing back fundamental mining and manufacturing is so critical to our ability to not only defend ourselves, but in the worst case that we are in an active war, just like we're seeing with Ukraine, it's not an issue of just strategies and tactics, but it becomes a supply issue. Supply not only for the military soldiers, but supply of actual raw materials that goes into the final output, whether it's a tank, drone, or something else.
Yeah, it's a good kind of complex question. Look, I'm not against globalization if it's appropriately managed, and I'm not against sort of having supply chains that are strong and resilient, but also provide the maximum efficiency. And some of that globalization effort that happened over the last 20 years was to try and do that, but I think it went too far. To have 100% of our titanium metal needs come from offshore is just not the right thing to do. To have most of our rare earth needs to come from one country, China, it's just not, especially with these rare earths going to military applications. Same as our titanium metal, heavily used in the military, is not the right thing. So I think bringing it back just gives us strength where we can bring it back, where it makes sense to bring it back. Just makes our country stronger and makes sure that the US stays at the forefront of being able to, defend itself if it comes to it. I hope it doesn't, and I hope that diplomacy prevails. But we need to be ready to be able to manufacture our own parts and components, military components, and whether that's our supply chain being wholly in the US, which is with titanium metal, we can actually have that, which is like, unlike some other areas, we might not be able to have that, whether it's relying just on what we have in the US and building that supply chain up, or whether it's trying to integrate with other countries that are our allies and build those supply chains. We need to do that. And look, we are doing that. What you saw from the Department of Energy in the White House with the funding, what you've seen from the last 3 bills that have been passed, Ukraine Bill, CHIPS Act, IRA, there is funding there, and there's a focus there on trying to get that back. It's a very complex topic, but I think with at least on what I've been involved with and what I saw with lithium, we can bring it back. With titanium, we can absolutely bring it back, and we're lucky in titanium in that we can be the world's leader, and there's no reason why we can't have the number one producer of titanium metal globally. Super.
Final question is, what's next for IperionX?
So for us, it's continuing to grow our production of titanium metal powders. We produce titanium metal powders today, and are actually producing some products already. We're selling, or we're delivering into the luxury watch space, where the consumers are very focused on their sustainability. But we are working with some of the major industries, automotive and others, in developing sustainable 100% recycled supply chains for using American-made titanium metal. So in the next 3-6 months, you'll see that advance significantly, and we aim to get that out into the market and continue to scale up our production over the next 12-18 months. And I think you'll see a lot of really positive things happen in that reshoring, building that sustainable supply chain of titanium metal here by us.
Great. Thank you for that. So today I've been joined by Anastasios Arima, CEO of IperionX. Thanks again for joining today.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Scott.
If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.